Pleasure. Right. So it's my great pleasure to welcome Dr. Martin Hendry. Dr. Hendry is a professor of gravitational astrophysics and cosmology, in the School of Physics and Astronomy at the University of Glasgow, and the Advocacy and Outreach Working Group lead at the LISA collaboration. Dr. Hendry also leads the Education and Public Outreach Group within the within the LIGO Scientific Collaboration. My apologies. So without further ado, Dr. Hendry, please.
Thanks, Saria. So welcome everyone. And as we've just heard, I'm from the University of Glasgow. So I'm here wearing my LISA hat today, although I do also wear a similar hat for LIGO. And in that sense, I'll also try to give a bit of an overview of advocacy and outreach across the gravitational wave spectrum. I should also say that I was almost Canadian. My family lived in northern British Columbia until just a few months before I was born. They had immigrated there a few years earlier, but it somehow didn't work out. So they came back to Glasgow, and that's where I grew up, and that's where I wound up. Again, it's a real pleasure to be part of this workshop for these few days. So what am I going to talk about? As I said, I'm wearing my LISA hat today, and the Advocacy and Outreach Committee is part of the governance structure in the LISA Consortium. So we report directly into the Executive Committee. And I'm delighted to be joined today by Kelly, who gave the opening talk a couple of days ago. And Kelly is the co-chair of Advocacy and Outreach. So I'll try not to talk for too long so that there's plenty of time for questions. And I'm sure Kelly will be more than happy to pitch in answering those as well. So what I'm going to do is just try and give you an overview of what AdvoReach is, encourage possibilities for ways you could get involved, and look at some specific projects that we've been involved in for LISA AdvoReach in the last couple of years. And one of the main things to emphasize is there are email address. If you want to contact myself or Kelly afterwards, then advoreach-chairs@lisamission.org. That's the email address you need. Okay, so we have a mission statement, and there's 4 main groups to whom we want to reach out and to coordinate the communications efforts on behalf of the consortium. So one is within the consortium itself, to find better ways to communicate across this large group of more than 1,000 scientists, spanning everything from instrument science to fundamental physics, cosmology, and astrophysics, and ensure that there are good opportunities for the different working groups within the collaboration to talk with each other. And we also seek to coordinate outreach and advocacy efforts across the gravitational wave spectrum. So we work closely with our colleagues in the ground-based communities, LIGO, Virgo, and indeed now CAGRA, and also NanoGrav. More broadly, there's a lot of outreach to be done to the wider astronomical community, particularly in areas of common science, advocating for how useful LISA will be and how complementary it will be to electromagnetic observations, for example. And then the fourth topic is basically everyone else. It's all about raising awareness of LISA to different non-science audiences, the general public, to journalists, to politicians, and other stakeholders. And I think the reason we went with this name of advocacy and outreach is that there's a real blurring of those two categories, that you're doing a mixture of advocacy and outreach to many of these 4 different groups. And this is an extra slide I just snuck in following the discussion we had in the breakout room, because I think it's quite instructive. It's a slide I gave at a talk at the Amaldi meeting in 2019. And it was to kind of address the question, well, you know, LISA doesn't fly for a long time. Where's the attraction for getting, say, graduate students involved if they're working on a project for a few years and LISA isn't going to fly for another 14 years or so? But if you look at the last 30 years or 30 years prior to 2019, when I gave this Amaldi talk, there's a very impressive number of papers with the word LISA in the literature over that time. It's approximately the same, in fact, as the number of papers with the word LIGO in the title. And when you bear in mind that LIGO's had a big spike since the first ground-based detection in 2015, or at least the first announcement in 2016, then it emphasizes that there's a very powerful community out there already who are working on LISA-related science and publishing articles on LISA-related science. And again, those are very healthily cited too, and the number of citations approximately half what it is for LIGO. And we can only expect, surely, that that number will continue to increase as we approach over the next decade or so the launch date. So the bottom line for me is that the advocacy we're trying to do is focusing efforts that have frankly already been underway for quite some time in the community, where astronomers have been advocating for what LISA will be capable of. We just want to help them hone that message and attune it to the particular opportunities that there are for multi-messenger and multi-wavelength astronomy. So in terms of doing all of that, we've sought to develop a communication strategy and to recognize that that needs to be tailored to the needs of different parties and stakeholders, local, regional, national, European, US, and indeed in some sense truly global. And in a lot of that, what we're trying to do is not reinvent the wheel, but to coordinate and get better value out of things which are happening locally already. So our Advocacy committee works closely with the LISA leadership team to craft these messages. And the kinds of messages we're looking to get out there is clearly why LISA's important, to emphasize not just the amazing science that LISA's going to do, but the remarkable technology that will enable that, to communicate information about the current status of the mission and the timeline, and also to invite people to join the consortium, to be a kind of shop window for joining the consortium itself. So quite recently, for example, there's been some very nice social media on the web, on the LISA Consortium website, www.lisamission.org, recognizing the amazing achievement of the LISA Pathfinder mission. So we've just passed a few key milestones, the 5th anniversary of those, when LISA Pathfinder was launched 5 years ago, and then science operations began early in 2016. So our colleagues in the Albert Einstein Institute in Germany led the production of some short videos, which were put on the website in recent weeks, and those have been attracting very good social media traffic. And just to give you a flavor of the approach that we adopt, so to emphasize that we're very keen on mixing the science with strong pop culture references to reach as broad an audience as we can, I thought I would share the opening of one of those videos with you. So that's just coming up now. And you'll recognize the context of the opening remarks. No John Williams music. We're too concerned about getting sued for that. But this sounds a bit more Guardian of the Galaxy than Star Wars. But nonetheless, it's just presenting an important scientific message in a fun way that will engage with as broad an audience as possible. And that's kind of the spirit of our approach to much of our communications, to use a variety of means to get these messages about LISA across. So if you'd like to work with us on LISA communications, that's one of the key areas where we're very keen to expand the number of people that we have contributing to that effort. Let's look at our internal communications next. So there's a consortium telecon, which right now we're holding on the last Monday of the month at 1700 Central European time. And the typical agenda covered will be consortium updates, news from the space agency, things about upcoming meetings and conferences, and then there'll be a special topic. So we typically rotate around the working groups within the consortium. And again, the key goal here is to make sure there's good lines of communication across the entire consortium, so that all the different working groups have a good sense of what everyone is doing. So if you want to join the consortium, this is certainly one area where we could also use some help on the Advocacy side in helping us to organize those Monday consortium telecons, and indeed to present some work of your own. But there are other ways you can do that too, because even if you don't feel quite ready to join the consortium yet, please be encouraged to join our community telecons. Those are on all the other Mondays, the Mondays that aren't the last Monday of the month, and those are open to anyone. All are welcome. We begin by sharing, and some consortium use, some can't be shared more widely at that particular time, but we seek to be as open about how the consortium is progressing as possible. And then there'll be a special topic, which is drawn across all aspects of LISA science and technology. And those talks are designed to introduce LISA science and technology and really to encourage consortium membership in some sense. So if you would like to come along and join those community telecons, please do. If you would like to offer a science talk, then get in touch with us as well. We're all ears. Moving on to just a brief survey of some of the other projects in which we've been involved. So our consortium website, in its current form, it conveys a lot of very useful information, but we're seeking to relaunch it quite soon. And in fact, the basic design of that relaunched website has already been finalized. Our aim is to make it rather more functional, to make it work better on different devices, from mobile phones through tablets to computers. And well, the next big step there is revamping the content as well. And we're in the process of setting out how we'll collect input from the working groups as the basis for writing short and snappy new text for that website. And well, an effective way to go about that, we think, is to form a small editorial team with volunteers across all areas of LISA work. So that's another opportunity to get involved in Advocacy activities as part of the consortium. We ran a successful consortium logo competition a few months ago. There were more than 80 entries, which we were delighted about. Many really imaginative and artistic. Some maybe not quite so serious, like this one down here, but it did make us giggle. And there was a clear winner in the end when we put it to the consortium vote. So congratulations to Davide Dal Bosco from Trento for the winning design, which you see here. And we're in the process of just finalizing some guidance notes on the usage of that consortium, but you've seen it in these last few days. A number of us are using it already on our slides, and they'll be available in a kind of template for slides and posters very soon. We're also interested in getting them onto t-shirts and mugs and laptop covers and all sorts. And indeed, Simon Barker from the Florida group has put together a very nice little video, which could be like an animated version of the consortium logo as well, and that could precede, for example, some of our videos. So lots to do there. Another thing we're putting together is a consortium logo slide. So this is very much a work in progress, but this is the draft version of it. And if you're in the consortium and don't see your logo there, then do get in touch. Let me know and we'll add you. We're trying to get them all gathered together. And indeed, it's a large number. I know Nelson was telling you about that earlier today, and the impressive number of groups that we have. So what other things have we been doing? What other areas might you get interested in helping? Well, we're very keen to put together multimedia. We have a very nice suite of LISA videos, and one of the ones that we updated recently was for the WES meeting last year. You can watch it on YouTube. And in fact, we've also gathered together a lot of these multimedia resources, and you can find them at that web link there. So, by all means, take a look. And that web link is designed for consortium members to find, a nice animation or illustration to use in their own talks. That's something we're working with the Publications and Presentations Committee on doing better. But there's a ton of stuff out there. There's some very nice scientific animations of the instrument itself or related science. The one in the top right here shows Hendry orbits, for example. There's actually a ton of great stuff that hasn't been produced by anyone working on LISA at all, but is nonetheless very impressive. So here's one here from Domain of Science, a very good website. I think it's someone in the UK that produces that, but there's some great stuff there. And then this was produced a few years ago by the Albert Einstein Institute. It's a wonderfully animated cartoon about gravity in general, but the final part of it focuses on LISA. So tons of great stuff to dig into there, but we're always on the lookout for people with neat ideas for new material as well. And again, you can find much of this at that tiny URL address that I mentioned before. So a key task that we would be delighted to get help with is taking a look at the resources we have and helping us work out what else we need to tell the story of LISA science more effectively. Now, one of the ways we do that already, but again, we could do better, is in social media. So we have a YouTube channel where you can find, for example, that WES video I just mentioned, and a number of playlists featuring different aspects of LISA science. We also have various social media accounts. So let me just focus on the YouTube channel for a moment. So there's some very nice short introduction to LISA videos that were done for the AAS meeting at the beginning of 2020. So those are typically just a minute or so long, and you'll recognize a few of the faces from the speakers this week, and they're great fun, but very informative. There's also, as you can see, a lot of videos from the last LISA symposium. Because of the pandemic, that was online in the autumn of last year, and all of those videos are now on our YouTube channel and are a great way to introduce many, many aspects of LISA science. Moving to multimedia, again, I'm just giving you a few snapshots, a few tasters here. We have Twitter and Facebook up and running already, and Instagram, the plan is for that to come along soon. So our Twitter account, for example, has been posting tweets this week about the LISA Canada meeting, and many thanks to those who've been live tweeting during the sessions. We've been retweeting some of that content. We've also been putting out some little vignettes about members of the Canadian community who are already involved in LISA science. And this is channeling, if you like, a very good model that's developed on the LIGO side, which we call our Humans of LIGO blog. And that was the brainchild of Zohir Doctor, a grad student in Chicago a few years ago. And it's been really terrific to do this. It's a way to emphasize that these large collaborations are nothing without the people that make them. And one of the things that really concentrated our minds on the LIGO side was, of course, the great public attention when the Nobel Prize was awarded in 2017. But that just went to the three senior figures. There's this vast army of people across the world who are contributing to that science. So maybe, we want to think of something like a Humans of LISA that we could get going as well. Now, in Black Hole Week earlier this month, there was a lot of attention on LISA. So many thanks to Michele and to Nora, who took part in a NASA-led panel on black holes. That was a Reddit Ask Me Anything session, which was very successful. And you may be aware that another thing that happened during Black Hole Week is there was a lot of attention on an idea that comes from Kelly, a real genius idea from Kelly, which was to come up with a collective noun for black holes. So there's been lots of engagement about that, tons of great suggestions. But I thought I would mention this for a slightly different reason as well, because I was delighted on the one hand to see just yesterday a tweet from QI, that's the BBC television programme. But notice what they've said. They said astronomers at LIGO are looking for a collective noun. This was really originated by LISA. So one of the things I'm very keen wearing my LISA hat to do is to make sure that, people don't think gravitational waves are just about LIGO. It's about the whole gravitational wave spectrum, and an effective way for us to address that is to work in partnership, which is very often what we do. And good examples of that are an initiative called iGrav, which is a kind of umbrella outreach organization, not just for gravitational waves outreach, but for outreach in gravity in general. And we set that up initially at the Amaldi meeting in 2019. And with the pandemic, progress has been slow, but we're getting there. And we expect to have another online meeting in July. Watch out for news about that. If you have an interest in outreach in general in the field of gravity, you would be more than welcome to get involved in iGrav. And then specifically in gravitational waves, we've done lots of online and prior to that, face-to-face exhibits at conferences and science festivals, working in partnership with our LIGO and Virgo and Nanograv colleagues. But we could use some help editing some of those virtual materials. So again, a great opportunity to get involved. There's some terrific stuff that we've produced already. The NASA LISA science team were behind some very nice little flyers about the different LISA sources that we'll see. So here's two examples on ultra-compact binaries and supermassive black hole mergers. But the more the merrier. There's such a great story to tell about LISA science. We're open to ideas for how we could convey that information in all manner of different ways. And things like this are suitable not just for scientists, but for the general public as well. So we want to produce them to be professional, to be attractive, to be informative, but they can serve many different audiences. So I'm almost done. Just a couple more examples of the resources that we have been producing and examples of the kind of thing that we would like to take a look at and perhaps update and extend and augment. So this is one looking at the gravitational wave spectrum. Another way of representing that has been very useful to have at big science festivals and science fairs. And again, a whole range of different multimedia videos. So these are some of the ones I mentioned before that were produced for the AAS in January 2020. These 1 minute and January 2021, and it's easy to forget. These are on our YouTube channel, and if people have ideas for others, that would be great. And indeed, one goal that's maybe a longer term goal, but we would like to seriously consider, is to create a LISA magazine, as LIGO has done for some years. LIGO's up to edition number 18 now, but we have the potential to take that as a model or maybe adapt it and do something similar for the LISA Consortium as well. So the last slide, one of the things that will help perhaps to just focus your thoughts if you're interested in getting involved is to have just a clearer idea of precisely what the tasks are associated with our Advoreach group. So we're in the process of producing some work packages. We've been working on this for some time, rather longer than we'd hoped, but we really are almost done with it. So before too much longer, just another month or so, we hope, those will be available to help sort of home in on some of the specific tasks that I've just touched on in this overview talk in the last 20 minutes or so. And well, the bottom line is the LISA Consortium needs you. There's lots to do in the science and technology side, but there's also lots of fun things to do on the Advoreach side. And if you're interested in getting involved, do drop us a line. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Martin, for the very interesting talk. There's time for questions, so please feel free to type your question in the chat window.
Yeah, I'll stop sharing. I saw there was lots of chat while I was talking, but I didn't have the chance to follow that. So let me see.
I might start by asking a very quick question. So you mentioned about the magazine, which is to be out soon. Like, are we talking about 2021 or sometime this year?
No, I think it's a longer term goal. I mean, this is a major undertaking. We are very fortunate to have some professional media leadership of that activity on the LIGO side. So there's a lot of thinking to be done, but it's just to let people see that we're quite ambitious. We're not just looking to have, the odd tweet going out, and we want to produce material which can be globally reaching, professionally produced, and highly informative, and essentially a great legacy, not just for LISA, but for the gravitational community overall.
Okay, great, thank you. There's a question from Samar Safi Harb. I'd read the question. Sorry if this was covered and I missed it, but can someone speak to the efforts on equity, diversity, and inclusion for LISA? Anyone who would like to answer, please.
Sure. Let me just say that there is a separate diversity, equity, and inclusion committee. So if Joey's on or if Sweha's on, then I'll just take a step back and hand it over to them.
Sure. Yeah, there's a diversity, equity, and inclusion committee within the LISA Consortium. We do work with advocacy and outreach on, some of the efforts, but there's a separate committee with good communication between the two. And it is relatively new. So we do a few things, including updating the code of conduct, so things like that. Some best practices for meetings. The committee came about from some meetings and noticing diversity of presenters and things like that. So we consult on meeting organization that's led by advocacy and outreach. We also consult on leadership appointments, some of the leadership appointments in the consortium, and organize sessions at meetings, talks or workshops on DEI related topics.
And also recently, just to add to that, we tried to formulate a DEI charter for LISA. This is something to kind of lead the effort on to give an example for the future members that would join LISA DEI group of, the protocols and what are things under our influence and what things are not under our influence, what's our relationship to the executive committee and all these groups, to clarify these things, because these types of communications were also not clear before. So it's paving the path for just better and clearer communication.
Yeah, exactly. We're a relatively new committee, so part of our work right now is setting things up. You may be interested in, we're also setting up an ombuds office, which will be separate. So this will not have to do with the DEI committee, but that will deal with reports and complaints and things like that. So that's a separate part of the consortium. And then Daryl's asking a question, if the difference between committees and working groups, and maybe somebody else wants to also say something about that. But working groups are open, anyone can join, and committees are either, members of committees are either elected or appointed and things like that.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you, Joey. Thank you, Sweta. There's a question from Salvo Voltaggio, which is the following: what about engaging with lower education environment, in, for example, high school in particular, young students, and talking equity, diversity, inclusion? This would be an amazing opportunity to contrast the lower representation of certain minorities. So young students are really what is to be inspired, in my opinion. Any comments?
Sure, yeah. I should say to begin with that there's a vast amount of such activities happening in terms of the ground-based gravitational wave community. So we always make sure that LISA is part of that story as well. And again, I think where we want to focus our efforts in LISA is ensuring that we're not just reinventing the wheel, but that we're maximizing that message that just like there's an electromagnetic spectrum that goes all the way from radio to X-rays and gamma rays, it's the same for gravitational waves. But nonetheless, there's some specific targeted efforts that we do hope to get going, and not least, perhaps, maybe this is ambitious, but I think we'd like to do it, to try to get some LISA-related science into the high school curriculum, so that you're not just relying on informal learning when you drop into a school to give a talk, but actually they've got to learn about it as part of the curriculum. Now, we've been hugely successful in doing that in Scotland. I drove that initiative about a decade ago, and now the senior phase of high school, they have, you know, gravitational waves covering both ground-based and space-based in the curriculum. In some other countries, there's efforts ongoing to make that happen. It's not easy, but let me say, once and if the mission is, well, I shouldn't say if, once the mission is adopted by the space agencies, then that will open up an enormous potential to push the formal education more effectively, because of course both NASA and ESA are hugely experienced at that, and we can make use of their existing machine.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark. There's a question in the Slack channel, so I'll read it out, from Deidre Shoemaker, which is, does anyone know if a graduate student can join the consortium solo without their advisor?
I can answer that if you like. I'm the head of the membership management team, which you can write to that team if you're interested in joining. I'll put that in the chat, I guess. But we do not encourage graduate students to join it without being part of one of the LISA groups, right? So our membership is made of a bunch of if we call external groups, and they need a leader. We don't want a graduate student leading one of those groups. It wouldn't have to be their thesis advisor or someone in their institution even, but we'd like them to have someone that they can associate with within the consortium.
Thank you. I guess I can ask a last quick question, and it's from Tasha Richardson, and the question is the LISA consortium going to produce some materials that will be developed to support teachers in high school to include in our delivery of the curriculum?
Yeah, great question again. So yes is the short answer, but the nuanced version of that is that what we want to do is maximize the overlap with existing resources. So as I said, in some countries, there's such material already produced. In fact, in Canada, there's some fantastic material produced by the Perimeter Institute on gravitational waves And on the LIGO side, we've ran teachers' workshops making use of those perimeter materials, but again, just making sure that it isn't just perceived as all about LIGO and Virgo, but is about the broader gravitational wave spectrum. So there's some low-hanging fruit we can go after that doesn't require us to completely create from scratch new material.
Well, thank you. Thank you for responding. We should perhaps move to the closeout session. So thank you everyone for your talk and answering the questions. And